Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks Show. It's the off season, so we are definitely going to be digging a little for topics to discuss. Luckily, there are still some news bites we were able to get into. I am Dre Alvarez, aka Nerd Numbers. With me, I have Arturo Galletti, who you can find on Twitter as Arturo Galletti. And the voice of God, our producer, is Brian Foster, who is on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. As always, Brian, you've actually been pretty quiet the last couple of shows, but I like having you introduce yourself at the start of the show, just because I know you don't have an avatar up and I don't want people getting shocked if you hop in with a thought mid show.
Absolutely. We'll find some for me to go to talk about, I'm sure.
All right. Yeah. Don't let me forget you during shout out time. I've done that. We like giving shout outs at the end of the show on multiple occasions. I've actually inadvertently snubbed Brian. So there are awesome people on the internet that you don't know about because I cut the show off too soon. All right. So, Arturo, we were looking for topics and we were trying to find a smart way to kind of tie things together. And what we ended up deciding is you wrote a historical piece, which for you and me is a terrible way to just lose an hour in a podcast. And I've actually given us a 30-minute restriction for this podcast. So I said the first 10 minutes of the show, we'd basically just see where your Robbins piece takes us. So you wrote a piece where I believe it was the top 30 Robins of all time at the Box Score Geeks.
Yeah.
And I love, I hate that people always cite Dennis Rodman as being problematic in San Antonio as a reason why he's not an all-time great,
Yeah.
when the reality is there was nobody else on that team except for Dennis Rodman and David Robinson.
That was, and again, I think I've done this piece at some point, which is like the rest of that roster was so bad. It was so. I mean, I invite anybody go look at that roster. I think Vinny Del Negro was the third best player on that team. It was a terrible. Here's the thing. Like, so Rodman goes from an all time historic dynasty team where he was, or at least at the end, he was arguably the best player. And really, they started really winning when they started playing him more. Then he goes to a San Antonio team that like wins like franchise highs in wins, and then like makes the finals, and then runs into Hakeem, who just happened to like be in his prime and really annoyed that they gave David Robinson the
I don't think
MVP
they
at
ever
some
made the
point.
finals with him, did
They
they?
made
I
they
think
made they made the
conference
conference
final.
finals.
Yeah,
It's
conference.
it's
Okay.
it's it's a quote at the end which says like where like they ask David Robinson about stopping Hakeem or solving Hakeem, and he goes, Hakeem, you don't solve Hakeem. And when they gave David Robinson the trophy before the game one, and like they gave David Robinson like Hakeem's MVP trophy, and then Hakeem basically made it his mission to destroy him, and then scored 42 points in the last. It was a very interesting series. So they made the conference finals. Then
In
they
terms
trade
of
him.
silly litmus tests, because you know my thoughts on the playoffs not being where you prove all-time greatness, I will say Hakeem taking down both David Robinson and Shaquille O'Neal in their primes in the playoffs, that is one argument for, because he's definitely a top five
Yeah,
on the
he
all-time
was.
centers list. That's one of his arguments for taking the top spot.
Yeah, I'll say this about like, and again, what's interesting in finishing the Rodman point is he went from then to that team, and then he goes to a Bulls team that basically runs off like is arguably the greatest basketball team of all time. So I mean, like it's really hard to make an argument against Dennis because wherever he played, and I've done this, wherever he played, if he played more than 20 minutes, that team won. That team
Yeah.
won at a ridiculously historic rate. Now, yeah, he played again with some great players sometimes, but like the trend was that wherever he was, he won. There's a
But
reason he
but
has so
that's
many.
that's any player. I mean, let's be fair. When you say when he played with other players, great players,
Well,
to be great in this league, that's the Kevin Love problem, right? If you strand a player up north with nothing, they're not going to be able to do much. I mean, the best they're going to be able to do is come close to the playoffs, but you need to give them something.
well, yeah. I mean, if you have historically bad rosters around you, then it's going to really be really bad. But again, I think the point being that when you have it's hard to make that argument about Dennis Rodman because there are clear indicators. Like, and again, people have done this. Skeptical Sports, Ben Morris has done this, where like he went out like in like if you look at the population and you look at Dennis Rodman's numbers, they're over here. And again, we underestimate like his defense, and I clearly remember Dennis Rodman being the best defender in the league at his time. He was the guy they would put him on the big man, and he would he could cover anybody in the league.
Yeah,
And
to
again, if
my
you
to my Dikembe Mutombo point, and this drives me nuts.
Mhm.
I refuse to accept mainstream people using defense, as a recent hated metric. When so far, I'm willing to bet that all three players that have won 3+ Defensive Player of the Year awards, which would be Rodman, Mutombo, and Ben Wallace will not be first ballot Hall of Famers, which is such a travesty to me.
Yeah, Ben Wallace is so underrated. I mean, I think for Ben the problem was like if he hadn't gotten hurt that season he was in Cleveland, that's a team that won 68 games and they'd actually gone through and actually won the title that year. I think, and again, rings, and we were talking about this in the Robins just before the podcast, which is it's the Mo Cheeks argument. So Mo Cheeks wins the one ring, and he wins the ring when Moses comes to town. But if you look at all the other seasons where like Mo Cheeks was like the other guy on that team, they made a whole bunch of finals. They were like in historical like 7-game series against like historically great Celtics. Like Cheeks was like an incredible player who doesn't get his due, probably because they couldn't quite get it done before Moses got to town. But I mean, like, they had wars against the Lakers. They had wars against the Celtics. They had wars against the Trailblazers. So it was a really kind of close thing for him. But I do think that ring and maybe even that second ring kind of pays. So nobody really thinks that like the ring the Pistons won in 2004 is Ben Wallace's ring, and he was the best guy on that team. But really, he was the defensive player. He was like the guy stopping Shaq and stopping.
I wrote this article on that. By the way, the year he won that ring, I believe either it was the top vote getter in the East or overall for the All-Star game. He was the top vote. He had some classification that you could argue him being the top vote getter in the All-Star game, which he started, of course. He was All NBA. He was All NBA. He either won Defensive Player of the Year that year or the year before. There was a break because of Ron Artest, which is stupid. But anyway, the fact that anybody ever says the starless Pistons, this is one of those things I just argue about all the time, drives me crazy because you can go look at the time and he was an All-Star on the All NBA team that year. Right. So there's no starless Pistons.
And again, it's kind of, as I said, the Robins thing is really interesting because it kind of, you get into these kind of where you're looking at these guys that you weren't thinking of. I mean, I got into like the whole thing like with the Bucks, so like how the '80s Bucks didn't win a title is kind of one of these crazy things that happened because loaded team that just were playing at the wrong time. It's like I was looking at the '80s. We've looked at '86 before, and you start looking at the rosters for those '86 teams, and
it's
completely.
Year.
Yeah, you look at the Sixers rosters, like Bobby Jones, and Bobby Jones is a guy who should be. I don't know if Bobby Jones is in the Hall of Fame, but he should be in the Hall of Fame. He's like the 5th best guy on this team. And this team didn't even get out of this. They didn't even get out of the second round, right? They didn't get to the conference finals because the East was so loaded. And it's always kind of at some point, it may be an interesting point to kind of pinpoint. At some point, it switched where when you start getting into the 90s and 2000s, it's the West that's crazy. But at one time, the East was as crazy as the West is now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I actually want to give. You were going to list your best Robin. I'm going to throw my punch in first, though. I actually, like I already mentioned, I have a problem with the playoffs as litmus tests. I actually have a problem with the term Robin because in comic books, Robin is essentially a glorified damsel in distress. Robin, I've seen several lists where he makes the most useless hero. When you list all of these teams, you're listing great players next to other great players. One other name I just want to give a shout out to is Horace Grant. People give way too much credit to Michael Jordan on the Bulls. I'm not saying he's not great. I'm saying he had great teammates. But, I don't see any of those players as, Robins compared to their greats. So I actually have a problem with the, Batman Robin comparison. It's supposed to be a thing of deference, right? The alpha dog and the backup. But, I think some of these teams we love the alpha dog mentality too much, which is why Kobe and Michael get all of the credit for what they're doing, and really only only Magic Johnson and LeBron James really kind of deserve that hype on some of their teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think the and again the modern take is slightly different. They're a little more even and a little less damsel in distress. You have Batgirl for that now. But it is a little
sad day. That's she was so strong under Gail Simone at one point. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah,
sorry,
no, but
we can't hit that tangent. I think we're hitting time. So anyway,
I mean, I think it goes to that. I mean, again, I think it's an interesting analogy people get, but I know what you're saying. I mean, a lot of these guys and a lot of these teams, what happens is, and I think it's the notion that guys have to kind of really to win the title, people have to you have to play with other stars. It's generally the story goes that unless you're playing with somebody else who's at your level, right? I've said this before. It's a superstar gives you hope, but really you kind of need 2 stars, right? You either need a superstar and a star or 2 stars. and that's when you kind of see these great results. And going to that, we're talking about you're talking about the playoffs being a bad barometer. So my favorite, pair ended up being like Marion and Nash, right? And Marion actually is funny because Marion actually shows up with Kid, and then they show up later when they win the title. But like those Suns teams, oh man, those Suns teams. Like just reading back on that is those Suns teams are so great.
So yeah,
And
two funny
so
notes on that is that everybody kind of gives Nash credit for improving his teams around him, but what I'll point out is Marion was great pre-Nash, and
yeah,
Nash really upped his game when he played next to Marion. So there may be an argument that Marion is the one who improved Nash.
well,
And the other,
what people will say on the internet is rings. Count the rings. Who's got the ring, right? Who's got the ring? Marion or Nash?
right. It's the same problem, right? I mean, the Philadelphia 76ers, you're talking with Mo Cheeks, by all rights should be one of the best dynasties ever. And the fact of the matter is, that stupid Larry Bird guy that, the Golden State Warriors foolishly passed on and let him go to Red Auerbach, the reality is in a better world, Golden State shouldn't have been so stupid and Boston shouldn't have ruled the 80s like they did.
There were some. They also like the Sixers also got. It's at that, again. It's that weird 70. So that the Sixers meet the Blazers in that great final in 77, and then 78, 79 is these weird seasons where people get hurt, and then you end up having. And I'm sorry, Wizards fans, and I'm sorry, Sonics fans, but those two are like the two most forgettable. Like you would imagine that two teams playing two straight finals would be a bigger deal, but those are somewhat forgettable teams. Even though there are a couple of like really good players on that not Wizards Bullets team.
Well, we've talked about that. It was one of James Bricato's article. Like that's like the only example in the history of NBA finals of not having a star player and winning the finals ever.
Yeah, but again, as I said, it was a weird season. If you start really looking at some of these rosters, and I said it in the piece, cocaine is a hell of a drug. There were some interesting things going on there, and then like once it cleared out, it's really interesting how like it went from kind of being a little bit chaos. Like so 77, like 78, 79 being like all these teams kind of bunched together, and then you like start looking at like the 80s and you see all these like super loaded teams with like Hall of Famers across the board, which is really insane. It's like the quality kind of jumps a level.
Well, the 85 draft just like made the future of several teams.
Well,
so actually,
I said this underrated the 87 draft where the Bulls got like Grant and Pippen in the same draft.
Oh, are you kidding me? I hadn't even realized that.
Yeah, they got Pippen in a trade at 5 and then Grant at 7
from the Sonics. Anyway, I was going to say we're about at time at this segment. I said I was going to keep us to about 10 minutes. So we said we were going to start on a Robin. We did what I thought we were going to do, which was Tangent Land. But you wanted to say your favorite Robin. I did the cop-out answer and said I don't think there should be a Robin, but I'll let you finish the segment up, and we'll
I'm gonna say a couple things. Mo Cheeks should be a Hall of Famer. He really should. I think Terry Porter also has a really good argument for being a Hall of Famer.
Horace Grant for sure.
Horace Grant will get in. It almost kind of brings me hope that it's a good bad thing that I can't believe Dennis Rodman actually made it into the Hall of Fame before Horace Grant. It's kind of a really I would never have thought that, but it's actually what did happen.
All right. So who is your best? So is that it? Mo Cheeks is your favorite Robin, or do you have another answer?
I'm gonna say Mo Cheeks is my favorite Robin, just because he just really doesn't get his due. And I think I said my favorite pair is Matrix and Nash.
Yeah, and so as a final, just note, because I did the two-parter thing and didn't say part two. The other interesting thing, this is from Kevin Draper, is that Suns team could have had Luol Deng next to Amari, Nash, and Marion. They traded him away, the draft rights. So that is really rough. They traded away his draft rights and then signed Joe Johnson. So imagine Luol Deng instead of Joe Johnson on that Phoenix squad.
Joe Johnson was actually really good on that.
No,
squad.
He was not. He was okay during that time, and Luol Deng was insane during that time. Anyway, so on the notes of difference makers in the West, and actually I think we might talk a little Phoenix. You told me right before the show started. It's hilarious.
So I'll go through stories. So Mitch Kupchak goes on Colin Cowherd this morning, right? And he says, Colin Cowherd asked him, do you think the Lakers are a playoff team? And Kupchak apparently completely seriously says, yes, we could be. And man, that's just delusional. Go ahead.
So I was going to say, the reason I'm starting to chuckle is I had forgotten about this too, and I have to look this up. Nick Young actually went out and made a comment that he said he was perfectly willing to be Kobe's Robin. So, which I think is perfectly appropriate in terms of using the Robin phrase, which the complaint I had.
Well,
I think that
are
Nick
you,
Young is a perfect definition of a Robin.
are you familiar with Jason Todd?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, of course, the
So
dial
so
in, the murder him.
so so Nick Young would be the perfect Jason Todd Robin.
No, Jay. If
Yes.
you're looking at Under the Red Hood and what they did with the comeback, the comeback
No.
I can't give you.
I'm sorry, but any combat that involves Superboy punching reality, right?
Was that the reason? I thought it was the. Anyways,
That's why Superboy punched reality, and that's how we got Jason Todd to come back to life. I have a bit of a hard time. I mean, I'll enjoy the stories, but like how they did that is kind of
by
okay.
the way, keep it on that tangent. I'm actually a huge Superboy fan. In my old house before I moved, I had the entire run of the new Superboy comics, not the new 52, but the when they first rebooted him under my desk. And it just depressed me what they ended up doing with that character because he was one of my favorite characters, and they introed him, and then all the retconning and the stupid punch, all that was ridiculous. But okay, so if we're talking non-Red Hood, I was going to say, if we're talking non-Red Hood Jason Todd, yeah, I'll give that as Nick Young. You want to,
Okay.
just want to
Maybe
call in a line to have him
maybe the
removed.
spoiler Robin, I don't know, but whatever. I think and again, what the interesting point was is if you start looking through the West, right, and let's start looking realistically through the Western playoff teams. And again, I'm not even going to be any controversial. I'm going to say, look, here's the West, right? If Seedom 1 through 15, I got San Antonio and Oklahoma 1 and 2, and again, I think Oklahoma is interesting because if Steven Adams continues to grow, that team could actually be. I mean, they're already good, but they could be like something like a really kind of top level kind of Sixers Celtics kind of dynamic going on.
Losing Fabo was a bad move, but if Steve Adams gets 5-10 more minutes a game,
we
won't even notice.
I mean, I'm okay, and I've been advocating for this, which is Reggie Jackson at the 1 and like Russell Westbrook at the 2. I've been saying this is what they should do, and I'm looking forward to see what actually happens when they do that. And they were kind of.
I want it to happen just to prove to you that Westbrook is a freaking chucker, and playing the 2 is not going to turn him into a star. And if anything, taking those assists off of his numbers are going to make him look even worse.
Anyway, well, we'll see. And then it's the Clippers, who again are at 3 but could actually move higher. Then we've got the Rockets at 4, who again are at 4, but if they stop going to nightclubs before national games, could actually move higher too. And I think actually going from Parsons, I said like going from a model who wants to be the Bachelor in Chandler Parsons to Trevor Ariza, who's like a kind of a better player, probably a good move in terms of character and fit for that team. Then you've got the Mavericks, who I kind of like sneakily like what they did. I mean, again, health is an issue, but like the Mavericks do seem to have like the Suns kind of track record at keeping their players healthy. So I do think it's actually a good fit for the guys they brought in. Even Jameer is kind of interesting because I'm curious to see what the medical staff and Carlisle do with Jameer.
I'm really that is the high variance team. I can see them being a 55 win team. I can see them missing the playoffs by a win or two.
We're in year like 7 or 8 of like them managing to actually get stuff out of guys or like get guys back to good conditions, kind of like the Suns. So I'm willing to Mark saying that he's building it by building these veteran guys who've proven performers and like keeping them healthy. And I think, we'll see it. Then we've got the Warriors, who, and somebody was saying, why do I have the Warriors at 6? And I'm like, well, because I kind of think that team is made of paper mache.
Not to be mean, why do you have the Warriors at 6? Because they finished at 6 this year, and what have they done in the offseason?
Well, I mean, again, yeah. I mean, I think the other trick, I know they have the superstar Klay Thompson, who's actually going to get better and like carry them to the top of a home court advantage. But again,
too much sarcasm. But anyway, continue.
If somebody could tell me, if somebody guaranteed to me that like Curry, Iguodala, and Bogut are all going to play 3,000 plus minutes, then I would have them higher. But I have a hard time even doing that. And I got Memphis at 7, and Memphis I have at 7 because I worry that Randolph and I've done some. Full confession, I've done some deep looks at that roster. I worry that like some of their key players are too old at this point, Randolph and Gasol. And I know I like the guys they brought in.
How old is Gasol? He's not that old, is he?
He's getting there, and he's been injury prone. Like
he's about to hit 30, so I'll give you.
Yeah, he's had the foot stuff. So like if you've got that and you're relying on them, I'd be fine if I didn't have to rely on him to be my guy. And I worry. I like what they've done, but this could be a transition year for them. Then you've got Portland, and again, I love Portland. I think Portland has a great roster, but I don't know how I could reasonably have them ahead of any of the teams in front of them. It's crazy.
And I mean, even this year, them in Indiana pulled the same thing. Where I love their strategy. By the way, you're wearing the Maury Ball shirt, and the only downside of the Maury Ball strategy is everybody's going to say it's LaMarcus Aldridge. When the reality is, if you just tell your team, "Hey, take a lot of threes," and you have some players that can hit those threes, your offense is just amazing, and you can handle LaMarcus Aldridge just shooting from the outside a ton. But
Well,
they were super hot, like to a ridiculous degree. So it's possible they hit that again, but that was 54 wins. That's
there
what
was
makes the West rough. You drop them 2 or 3 wins, that drops them 2 or 3 spots. So I
well,
get
somebody was asking me like, oh no, they lost. Like they lost Lynn, they lost like for Houston, they lost Lynn, they lost Asik, they lost
Parsons, of course.
Parsons. And I'm like, well, they've proven that like people forget that Lynn came up through the D League system. I forget the name of the guy they brought in for the playoffs. Who was actually really good in the playoffs. Another D League guy. They do have like this talent, kind of. They can bring up these guys, kind of like the Spurs. And I like their draft. I like Clint Capella. So I mean, I think the Rockets are still kind of doing smart personnel things at like on the ground level, which I think kind of play to them. And again, I think here's the interesting thing, and I haven't gotten to 10 yet, but like any team from 4 to 10 in the West, and the team I have 10, I could see finishing fourth. So
Oh yeah,
nine,
like I just said, the West is nuts. Three, let's. I'm curious about this. So this year,
50 wins.
eighth
50
place was
wins might,
49.
yeah,
Let's see.
50 wins might get you the 50 wins might get you the 10th seed in
Fourth,
this year.
4 through 8 were separated by 5 wins. That's plus or
Yeah.
minus 2.5 wins. That's absurd.
And we've got Phoenix. We got with Phoenix. We got at 9. And again, here's the thing: we've got Bledsoe. We don't know what's going to happen there. I've got Denver at 10, and Denver is the most interesting team in the bunch because Denver basically went back and they put the team from when after Melo left back together. They got a follow. They got Lawson. They got Fareed. McGee's coming back. They've got Danilo coming back. And it's a better version of that team because the other slots, like there's no Al Harrington to take like dumb shots. I kind of like Nate. I like the other rookies they brought in. So Denver's a really kind of interesting team. If they stay healthy, I mean, I could see that team winning 52, 53.
Don't give me optimism, man. I left the state after last season, so.
But look at that roster. It's the same roster you had when you like had these great seasons, and like they're gonna play. I mean, they're gonna play Fareed. McGee's back. They've got some really good. As I said, I could see.
And I liked Costa Kufis, but the reality is, if they just given McGee more minutes, like George Karl, instead of playing Kufis and McGee, was basically treating them as one player. So
but who's the worst? Who's the worst player on that? It's one of these rosters like they don't have any bad players. If Lawson and follow Fareed and stay healthy, and like if you get anything from Danilo, it's I think they're a 48 win team right now. If they get anything from Danilo or from anything else, they might be 52, 53.
I hate you right now, man. I don't want hope again. I've been,
But
I think we were talking, Patrick on a previous podcast was basically saying as soon as Love leaves Minnesota, he's just going to leave with it. I've been ready to give up on the Nuggets franchise after, letting go of Masai. They let Dean go before that. They let go of good people that I liked in the front office. So, at this point, it's kind of like, I'm ready to go. So if they have like a 45, 50 win season and make noise in the playoffs, I'll just be upset, to be honest. All right, so that's 10. What else do you got?
I got Minnesota at 11, which is kind of crazy because I do think like if Minnesota stays, and again I think Minnesota
is that assuming Love is gone, or are you assuming Love plays something?
I'm assuming Love is there, but it's gonna be kind of like Dwightmare, where Love is just gonna be like checked out for the entire season, where like he's just gonna be like I'm gone after this. Then I've got the Pelicans at 12. And again, this is if Anthony Davis all of a sudden kind of just like jumps a level, then
if he does a Paul George, which would be ridiculous on its own, but I could see it happening. Oh, did I cut out?
Looks like we've lost Arturo. It's all you, Dre, and we're still taping.
Oh, this is lame. All right, so I can possibly do a cut when we do the audio version. But that being said, okay, so his point on Anthony Davis, for what it's worth, is ridiculous. Oh, you're back? Okay, so I was following up on your point. Anthony Davis could do a Paul George jump, which is to say, going from being a great player to even greater.
Yeah, and again, Ryan Anderson could be back too, and like so. I mean, that team's interesting. I mean, again, we're starting to get into teams that have like serious holes, or as I like to call them, teams that would probably get home court in the East. And then we're after that we've got the Kings, who again the Kings. The only reason I have the Kings over the Lakers is, and again, you're gonna say I've got Boogie fever, but I think the
Boogie is at least a productive big. I think you think he's going to be a star someday, and it's possible, but I'm just not holding my breath.
Everybody like all the coaches I know are like, oh, he's got, and he'll show these flashes where like he's insane. I do think it's a weird team. I wish they kept Isaiah Thomas. But it's a strange team. I do think they have their best player is better than like the Lakers' best player, right? And I think
they kept Jordan Hill. So, well, do you think Jordan Hill's going to get any playing time though?
Yeah, no, I don't think. Again, you've got Hill, you've got it's Hill, Sacre, Boozer, Randall. So I'm thinking they're gonna go Boozer, Randall. I mean that's gonna happen. Which is just going to be real. That's going to be a really.
They have Boozer. Holy cow!
They have Boozer. It's. I think they're starting their ideal starting lineup. So this is what they want to play. If they have their druthers, everybody's healthy. They're going to go Lynn, Nick Young, Kobe Bryant, then Randall and Boozer. That is their ideal crunch time five.
How many misses? Okay, so here's a question. Arturo, I want you to give me an over-under on a bad, obviously not every game, but there's going to be a bad game, some game for the Lakers next season with that roster. How many misses do you think they can put up in one quarter?
I can tell you that it's going to happen. It's either going to happen against the Spurs or the Clippers. So the most misses will probably be against the Spurs, and they'll probably miss something like 24 shots in a quarter. So it'll be something ridiculous. Like Pop will be like, you know what? I'm going to be weird. I'm going to have Ryan Anderson dribble the ball, and I'll have Ryan Anderson, Danny Green, Kawhi Leonard, Thiago Splitter, and Bobo. That'll be my five. I'll throw them out.
Who's
go ahead
Bobo again?
Diaw.
Okay.
And that'll be my line. I'll have Diaw and Anderson handle the ball, and then you try to score against that with Randall and I'll put like Kawhi on on Randall, and then let you feed the ball to Boozer. It's insane. It's just an insane team that the Lakers have put together. I mean, again, I like Lynn, but I mean, if this is the roster you were going to put together, why the hell did you get rid of Mike D'Antoni? I really don't get it. I mean,
the only hope that team has is Jordan Hill gets playing time, and even then, I'm not for it because you were saying you like the Kings. The one point is the Lakers are they run out of steam so quick that you're going to be giving minutes to a bad player.
Well, but again, you want to play Randall. I mean, the point for this team is you want to develop Randall. You think Randall can actually be a really good player, so you have to play him. And again, it's kind of weird because, see, here's the thing, and this is, and I don't want to sound like a Laker hater, but again, I have my druthers. I do have a card that says bona fide Laker hater, but I'm going to put that down. I'm going to talk about that. So I'm going to say, look. The Lakers had as much cap room as you could possibly. I mean, they had Kobe on the roster, but they had all the cap room in the world.
Like 20, 30 million or something like that.
And they couldn't get anybody to even think about coming. People would rather have gone to the Clippers than gone to the Lakers, right? It's like
well, the Clippers this year makes sense, but I mean, I think if we look back in history, the Knicks CP3 trade was the beginning of the end of the Lakers dynasties. Like that was. That trade was when
that's last Timmy Bus thing.
Well, I think that was the last. I think that was when the league actually stepped in and said the magic you've had, hate to do a pun, has disappeared. By the way, we're almost out of time, so I was going to say we've done a lot of Lakers stuff.
I was like the Jazz. I don't know if the Jazz are actually going to try. So if the Jazz try, they could probably finish like in the 12-13 slot in the West. Want to do the East real quick?
No, not with the time we got left. So that's the West. We can leave that on the. Well, also I'm going to say we should hold off on the East until I want to see what happens with Cleveland.
I have a hypothetical for you now that you've mentioned Cleveland. So I was asking this question on Twitter, right? So the Cavs right now, right? You get the Cavs, the Cavs roster as it is right now in a playoff series, played at a neutral site. We're playing in Toronto. Everybody's healthy, and they're playing the 2007 Cavs. Who wins?
I'd go 2007.
Yeah, and again, that's like a lot of people are like, no, Kyrie. And I'm like, well, I mean, the problem with, and again, this is the problem with this current Cavs roster is like, if you're playing a team like that, who's covering like Big Z? Like who's handling the Gauskas in the post? And it's the problem with that Cavs roster is like if you're playing Washington, who's covering Gortat and Nene, right? So and Pierce, and they're gonna attack you on that. So which is kind of why like if I'm them, I'm kind of going like if I can move Wiggins for Love and then maybe turn Waiters into something like Dallenberg and Shumpert. Wouldn't that be kind of interesting?
If this team gets Love, it's a game changer. But I want to wait to see it till the dust settles. If not, see it as LeBron being nice and giving one. Basically, the Cavs, as you discussed, right, lucked out in the TV renegotiation, and that LeBron basically said, "I'm not going to sign my next long-term deal yet. I don't want to settle in Miami." Because they're going to go long basically with Bosch and or Wade. So he basically said, I'm going to find a team that I can stay on for a year or two, and then we'll go from there. All right. So I did want to just give kind of a brief monologue, and you're welcome to chime in a little after, just on position players. I don't want to go too in depth. There's been a lot on the site. You even said you were burnt out, Arturo, and as we've seen, you and I can go back and forth on like which Robin was the worst. So
who likes to talk about position adjustment? Hitler.
And you still went with the joke anyway. All right, Arturo did that in the pre-show. He got a groan out of me and Brian, and you, God bless you, like Nick Young, you still went for the shot in game time.
It's like you shooting the joke and watching it. I'm doing this while it's like missing the.
Yeah. What was that great? Ben Golker sent that out. The great Michael Jordan commercial where he says, "You think it's easy what I do, but it takes hard work. You were fooled." And they show like every one of Josh Smith's air balls last year is great. Yeah. All right. So anyway, basically my simple point on position players is people come in with this argument that basically goes, well, basketball is a nuanced game and players aren't just a 2 or a 3, or, they're not just a big or a small, and there's defensive adjustments and it's so complicated. And what I'll basically say is you're not wrong. The players, there are shifts on defense. Players do play multiple positions. We do adjust for some of that with some players will change their minutes. But the simple fact of the matter is if you look at wins produced, it's a simple model. We're basically just trying to simplify things. And the reality is, if you look at how big the position adjustment is next to close positions, meaning like a 2 to a 3, a 3 to a 4, it's not so big that it's going to make a gigantic hit on the player. And there's tons to do in terms of changing your assessment of a player. If you think Dirk Nowitzki isn't really a power forward, you can look at him as if he was a small forward. The functionality is actually on the site. So it's a simplified model that does a really good job. And yeah, there are corner cases, but that's, a point of a model is not to get 100%. It's to be a pretty good approximation. Well, and we think it is. But
I think that's the key thing. It's the point of a model. I think what people miss is that what we're really going for when we do a model is there's too much information, right? It's too complicated, it's too nuanced. So we build a simple model that's a reasonable approximation, and we use that to kind of give us the big picture. And again, as you're pointing out, there's nuance. Ari's done the nuance novel. I've done the nuance model where you kind of go look at the little details. And, this is where humans come in. We use the models and the numbers to kind of give us the big picture. We cannot process that amount of data properly. You've written this before, like where the eye tricks us. We can't do that. Once we do that and we get the pointers to where we need to go, then we can bring in a deeper analysis and do the nuance. And that's kind of the point. And I get what people are saying that, but like, again, what I came in, this was the first comment I made. I said, like, look, I thought what Nate was doing was clever, and I understand why he's doing it. But what I found is using the simple, when you actually go through the whole analysis, using the simple kind of one number model and one win model is good enough for what you're doing. And then the nuance, you can actually go and find it.
Yeah. And and what I find, by the way, with most of these things, Dirk Nowitzki being a player, is the arguments people come back aren't substantive enough for me to be, swayed. The big one people come back with is defense. And your boy Klay Thompson, I've looked into the numbers, with things like synergy, and I'm just not impressed. So what I'm saying is people are arguing, you're leaving all this out. And then what they come back with, typically, not all of you, some of you do a really good job and I appreciate it, but a lot of people come back with basically arguments that don't add any nuance. So that's kind of my point there. And then adding to the wins above replacement, which kind of spurred the start, which is to say, my problem with wins above replacement is you're basically trying to simplify, is it macro or micro in this case?
Well, but nobody can give me a good explanation of what the hell the replacement level is. And I know because I've probably done more research on replacement level in the NBA than and I've read every single paper. And again, what I've found is that it's kind of tricky because you can come up with a number that you think is what is out there, but then there are teams that come out and break the curve. So the Spurs, the Rockets break this curve because they know that there are huge their reservoirs of basketball talent out there you can tap, and you can get guys for min contracts that
But
are
then
like
there are
like
other parts,
average
right? Like when
average NBA players.
LeBron James is on the market and the salary cap and the fact that you have to spend 80% of your cap and minute allocation. So all I'm saying is that's a very complicated model. Roster allocation is a very complicated model that's dealing with micro or macro. I apologize, it's been years since I've taken the class. Dealing with an entire set of economics that is really difficult. And so when people come in and say wins above replacement is good enough for that, no, that's an entire field of study that is really complicated. When you talk about the modeling of players in different positions, point guard through center, that is not complicated, not anywhere near. So I get upset that the same two arguments can come at us from the same groups of people. And apologies, but you're wrong.
Here's another thing. So we have these long email chains that like take place apart from this, where like all the wonks are kind of talking, and we've been talking back and forth and building models. So, and I may write a flown paper on this. And I did the research. I put this out there. I looked at the spread of wins. I looked at the value of wins, and I looked at it against the CBA. And basically, what the numbers told me was you expect 6 guys in the league to be worth the max based on how the CBA is currently written. And you expect 40% of the players in the league to be overpaid at the minimum level. So basically, if you really think about it and you do the numbers, more than half the players in the league are making more than they should. And it's interesting because the CBA is written in such a way that the majority of the players are making more than they should, and they're doing it at the expense of the top level players, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So but if you really view it from the point of view of like, if I'm the owners and I'm negotiating with the players, what I really want to do is put up a deal where like the majority of the players are happy or overpaid, even if they're not the most productive guy. So my incentive is so that the union will vote for the deal, not that the best. And also, I don't want the best players to get what they should get, because if they do, then I might not be able to afford them.
Well, yeah, the way the CBA works is the stars are underpaid and rookies are underpaid, and that's because stars are just such a small group by definition. They can't really rally the entire league against them, and rookies aren't at the table. So that makes sense. All right,
but the interesting point is mid-level players in general are overpaid.
Oh, absolutely. I don't disagree with that at all. But I'm just saying the market still, for knowing what your market for a small forward on your team and how much that would cost, that's not simple. That was all I was saying in the last podcast with Patrick.
Well, I even got into a snarky exchange with Dave because I was saying that there's only I was saying that I wouldn't pay a guard the max. And he was arguing, oh, you pay for wins. And I'm like, so he was like, he mentioned 3 guards. And I said, so yeah, I pay Chris Paul the max. I play James Harden the max, and Steph Curry I play the max, but I take out one of these Lloyds of London's crazy insurance on his like legs. And that's it. I wouldn't pay any other guard the max.
At the point though, this is like market, right? The one thing is, with the exception of Chris Paul, you don't have to pay a really good point guard the max. I can't believe I wanted to end at 30. We're going to end at 40. I knew this was going to happen, but anyway, that's the other part when you're talking market economics and teams like the Spurs. It's realizing market inefficiencies. And Patrick and I said that in the podcast. The assumption of a replacement level player has to assume that the market is somewhat efficient, and the NBA market is not. So we know that, and that's anyway. Off that trade, that's all I wanted to say. It's positional adjustment. It's not as complicated as people are making it out to be. Replacement players, way more complicated. As you can tell, Arturo's thinking there's a Sloan paper there out of it. That should tell you already. More complicated than it should be. Stop trying to tell me both of those things at the same time. Incorrect. And that's
it's an interesting thing that there is no paper out there, right? I haven't seen it where like, other than the stuff I've actually written, which is kind of funny, where it says like, this is what players should get paid in the NBA, right? Either I've written it or Dave has written it, but there isn't one definitive, this is what players should be worth if you're going out to market. And then you get all these, like, everybody's going like, oh, this guy's getting paid too much, or this guy's getting paid too little. But then when you start really looking at it, you're like, well, that's going rate. And then you go like, well, oh, the TV contract's exploding. So really, you're actually getting a bargain. And even we argue about this because Patrick doesn't like paying like mid-level players. And I'm okay with it because I kind of think that, you, as long as you're getting value at the back end, you can actually trade them. But again, I think we're not going to solve this problem now, and we'll keep talking about it as long as we have the blogs, right?
Exactly. All right, so that brings us to the end of the show, which is shout out time. Brian, just type to me if you have a shout out. I'll make sure I don't forget you. But Arturo, do you want to go first or me?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna give a shout out to Daniel Leroux, who's had me on the Real GM podcast a couple times, and whose idea he sent an email to myself and Ian Levy and said, "I want a post on the second on the Robins. I want to post on Robins and the greatest Robins." And basically, Ian was like, "Well, either if Arturo doesn't do it, then I'll sign one of my guys on Island Calculus to do it." And I was like, "No, no, no, no! I'm doing this post. I've got the data."
By the
So
way, unlike the NBA where you are restricted to certain teams, I am such a big fan of Ian, and you guys are not Batman Robin-ish. You would be Avengers-ish. If there's anything with nylon calculus, by all means, some of your stuff at like Real GM, some of your podcasts there, hopping over to other places and talking there is more than fine. So don't get into contest with Ian. If you guys want to get together and fight against bad stats, I would love to see that.
and if I'm gonna throw out shout outs to people who have me on podcasts, I'll also throw like to B-ball breakdown. Coach Nick. Coach Nick is great.
Always
He's
Coach Nick.
Coach Nick is doing a triangle clinic in New York. He was in Good Morning America, like at least visiting in the audience. He's like, watch his Twitter feed. Good guy. I've worked on him with like on some videos more than once, and I'm talking about basketball videos, people.
Worked with him. Anyway, all right. And so my shout out, this was one of the coolest things ever. And I believe I sent you a link, Brian. So hopefully it's going up to you listeners and you can see me looking away, is to Krishna Narsu. Hope I got that right. Who made these amazing charts of basically how Kobe Bryant and LeBron James act relative to the shot clock. I'm not 100% certain how the data for the shot clock is. I'll have to look into it. But it's just amazing to notice the type of shot they take and how they act closer to the shot clock. And I love it.
Is that the bat? Is that the Vantage Sports guy?
Could be. Let me see what his thing. It is Vantage Sports and Nylon Calculus. Amazing.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Chris is a nice guy. I've worked with him before. He shared the data. He's good. He writes good stuff. We were like So as you were saying, it's like I'll work with basically anybody who wants a shout or wants some help. Just send me a link. I'm pretty easy to get interested in anything basketball related.
Exactly. And okay, Brian, I can't tell. I don't know if you said anything about that. So
I'm ready to go, Dre. Let's talk here.
You got a shout out?
I do. In fact, first off, shout out to the Golden State Warriors. As Arturo mentioned earlier, they were kind enough to draft Purvis Short 5th overall, past Larry Bird, to propel his Celtics greatness. Not only that, a couple years before, they sent McHale Parrish over there for next to nothing. So thanks, Warriors. Good job.
Joe Barry Carroll.
Joe Barry Carroll. That's right. Joe barely cares. And my second shout out is to Arturo himself. Not only for his new mic, which sounds amazing, and his new adult career that was referenced earlier. Good luck with that as well. But mainly for his tweet today. Well, let's shrink this down a little bit here so we can get all the majesty in. I think it speaks for itself, everyone. That's all I got today.
There you go. I know I saw that earlier. By the way, I love the shout out thing and I don't actually hate it, but as us as judges, I've noticed we do have a very nepotism based thing where, we shout it out like Dave or other people. So I like it though. I'm okay with that.
Well, no, I mean, like, it was Danny's idea to do a roving post, and then, like, Ian's been doing cool stuff, and Ian's always, like, helped me with, I was like, I'm cool.
I was talking Brian giving you the shout out, like us giving Dave the shout out. We're like, and the Boxscore Geek Award for best person is a Boxscore Geek.
There you go.
And by the way, on the same note, Brian, actually,
then I changed that shout out. It's to Terry Crews, not Arturo. There you go.
Terry Crews. No. Make the shout out to Hector Elizondo Camacho.
Even better.
All right, and what I will do is I'll do the same thing, by the way. I think I occasionally forget to thank you at the top of the blog, but yeah, our producer Brian is amazing. It's why we get these every week. So yeah, there's our shout out. Only, let's see, what we were supposed to end at 9:08. So only 13 minutes over. Not bad for Boxscore Geeks. We always go into overtime, always get the penalty kicks. We will see you next week.